Breast cancer is the most common cancer in women. And believe it or not, diet can actually make it worse. Today, I'm going to discuss the 5 worst foods for breast cancer.
You're watching the Dr. Jake podcast.
I'm Dr. Jake. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor and integrative physician in Salt Lake City, Utah. On this channel, I share with you how we can heal your body naturally without any harmful drugs or surgery. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. Okay, let's jump in. Chances are that you or a loved one has been diagnosed with breast cancer. Today, we're going to talk about 5 foods that you actually should avoid. So let's dive in. Why does food even matter to treating cancer? It's really, we need to look at the metabolism of cancer and how cancer grows. And we need to talk about the food that it loves. So with breast cancer, it really does love sugar. So the higher your blood sugar is, the more sugar that you eat, the more it's going to feed the sugar and make it grow. So some of the big things that we want to do is starve the cancer through limiting how much sugar that we put into our bodies. Also, food has a lot of anti-cancer properties to it and certain effects it has on how our body works, like boosting our immune system, helping our liver work appropriately through food. So there's a lot of different things that can help with and why we want to follow a good, healthy diet when we're treating breast cancer. So number one food that I think is worst for breast cancer is refined sugar. Why do I say that? For one, we talked about, hey, the higher your blood sugar is, the more sugar you have in your body, the more the breast cancer cells are going to grow. So if we eat refined sugar, we're going to spike our blood sugar. Cancer is going to be really happy, jumping up or in celebration because it's getting tons of sugar and it's going to be getting all the fuel that it needs to be able to grow. Also, there's a lot of inflammatory components that happens when we eat refined sugar. We have these inflammatory cytokines, which is then going to disrupt how our immune system works and decreases our ability to be able to fight cancer. So refined sugar is a horrible one.
Yeah, when you say refined sugar, I think of that bag of white sugar in my cupboard that we use to bake cookies and cakes. Is that what you're talking about? Or is there anything you want to add to that list?
So yeah, I'm talking about the cane sugar, but also high fructose corn syrup is in that list. Agave syrup is in that list. So any sugar that you really refine a lot, I would even put some of the more natural sugars like coconut sugar or maple syrup in that range, even though those are better than these foods, but those are still going to feed those cancer cells. Number 2 worst food for breast cancer is fruit juices. Oh man, that's going to be a big shocker for a lot of people, right? Wait, fruit is good for you, right? It has a lot of antioxidants in there. It has a lot of nutrients, vitamins, minerals. Yeah, it does. But also, when you put it in the juice form, it's going to be absorbed much more readily and it's going to have tons of sugar. There's actually a study that came out of France that studied fruit juices and they saw a huge increase on the risk of getting cancers in general, including breast cancer with people that were drinking a lot of fruit juices. And they compared that even to soda and it was exactly the same as soda. So that was a really interesting study comparing soda and fruit juices. So fruit juice for cancer is just as bad as a Coke or a Diet Coke, for example. So we want to limit the amount of fruit sugar that we get into our body, especially from fruit juices, because again, that's going to feed the sugar, give all the fuel that it needs to be able to grow and divide. So we want to, in my opinion, limit fruit juices a great deal if you do have breast cancer or if you want to prevent it. Number 3 worst food for breast cancer is processed meats and really food meats in general, but processed meats has the most research on it being horrible for breast cancer cells. And this is because of the high amount of nitrates, preservatives, all that type of stuff that's in there. Also the poor quality saturated fats. Many times they even have trans fats in them. So they're horrible for breast cancer cells. And there's tons of research on poor quality saturated fats or trans fats in promoting cancer growth. So we greatly want to limit those processed meats, which I'm referring to is bacon, salami, ham. Those are probably the worst ones, but even other meats we want to try to limit because those have been shown to help promote breast cancer cells too, even though those aren't as bad, in my opinion, as some of the other sugars that we talked about, refined sugar and fruit juices. Yeah, some other big role of how meat has an effect on promoting cancer growth is insulin growth factor. It's great for building muscle, making us stronger, but it's also going to promote cancer growth when we have high amounts of insulin growth factor. So we don't want to be stimulating that a lot. And when we eat meat, it does that. Number 4 worst food for breast cancer is grains. So we're going along the same level here is grains are really high in sugar. Worse are refined grains, but even whole grains are even bad for breast cancer because of all the sugar that has in it. So let's discuss this a little bit. So we have something called the glycemic index, and the number 100 foods, like the top food is white bread. And guess what? Refined sugar like cane sugar is actually at a 60. So white bread is a ton worse than even refined sugar on increasing our blood sugar levels. So we want to greatly limit grains, especially like wheat, but also we want to limit whole wheat. We want to limit corn. We want to limit rice and many other grains because of all the sugar that they're going to put into our body and give the cancer cells all the fuel it needs to be able to grow. Now, refined is worse because that's going to spike your blood sugar worse than anything else. But even the ones with the fiber, the whole grains, are still not going to be the best for breast cancer. Well, I'm not anti-grains necessarily for all people on the planet. I think grains are good for majority of people. But if you actively have cancer, it's not a good idea. But looking at the food pyramid, they would have made us all type 2 diabetics following that food pyramid. They were saying 11 servings of grain, which is crazy amount of grains per day. So at least that's what it was when I was a kid. Maybe they've changed it from there, but that's what it was. 11 servings of grain per day we needed to get of grains. And we would all have blood sugar issues if we did that. The last food that I wanted to talk about regarding the worst food for breast cancer is dairy products. I know you're all going to hate me because you love your cheese, you love your milk, you love your yogurt, etc. in the mornings and throughout the day. But the big problem with the dairy is one, it has the insulin growth factor. We already talked about that. That's going to help promote the growth of cancer. It also is really high in saturated fat if you do the whole fat one. But also, let's say you go with a low fat, like a skim milk. That's going to be really high in sugar at that point, and you're going to spike your blood sugar a lot at that point. But probably one of the most interesting ones about dairy is it tends to be really high in hormones, especially estrogen. And a lot of breast cancers are estrogen sensitive. So we don't want to get a ton of estrogen in our body when we have breast cancer because you're going to promote the growth through there. So there's 3 separate reasons why we want to limit dairy products in our diet. So dairy does include all forms of dairy. If you're getting it from a sheep, a goat, or a cow, whatever. And I did not include eggs in there, but it's just interesting you bring it up. I would say eggs is one of the bad foods for breast cancer, but I didn't put it on this list. But it's a bad one too. So yeah, we want to limit that eggs also. So this is going to be the really surprising one for a lot of people out there is a lot of people probably are thinking, oh, he's going to be talking about soy as one of the worst foods. Now, I'm talking about it here because I wanted to talk about soy in the debate behind soy. Oh, is it really horrible for breast cancer or is it good for breast cancer? I'm leaning towards that it actually is good for breast cancer. Now, if it's done wrong, it's bad for breast cancer. So if you're eating a lot of poor quality soy and you're getting it from like soy lecithin or the processed forms of soy, or you're getting the GMO forms of soy, yeah, that's going to promote cancer growth. But also soy is really high in phytoestrogens. And this is what a lot of researchers were concerned about. It's like, hey, wait, that's phytoestrogens. These are like estrogen. That's going to very likely be horrible for breast cancer, especially if you're estrogen sensitive. But what we're actually seeing is in cultures that eat a ton of soy, they don't have higher risk of breast cancer. They actually have lower risk of breast cancer than we do here in the United States, like the Asian cultures, for example. And they eat a lot of soy, but they do it in fermented soy like tempeh, and they're making sure it's a good quality soy also when they eat it. So the phytoestrogens compete with the high reactive estrogens that our body naturally makes, especially estradiol, which is a really strong estrogen. Phytoestrogen are little baby estrogens, so they dock on the receptor and take the place of the estradiol and decreases that signal of growth by doing that. So I'm really a proponent of eating soy in the right way, making sure it's like in a tempeh or an organic soy and not eating the poor quality GMO soy. So what are the best food for breast cancer? I'm sure this is what a lot of you are thinking. Okay, you told us about the worst food, but what are some foods that I can actually eat? We're actually going to do a video of this at a later date, so stay tuned for that. If you want to learn more about the 5 best foods for breast cancer, click my video to the right. I'm Dr. Jake, and I'll see you there.